So, hi everyone, and welcome back to another interview series. My name is Owen. I'm on the committee at the Irish Aviation Students Association, and I'm joined by my colleague Kieran here and Raymond Kerr, who's the managing director of Kestrel Drone. And Raymond, I suppose we'll start off initially by asking you maybe to explain a little bit about yourself, the company, and then also how you think COVID-19 will impact both the aviation and the drone industry.
Okay, so yeah, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to join you this afternoon. I've spent almost my entire working career in the aviation business. Started off straight from school. I joined a small Scottish regional carrier called Loganair, you may have heard of.
Yeah.
And I actually joined, I joined as an engineering apprentice. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I didn't actually finish the apprenticeship. I was drawn to the bright lights of the terminal building. And I think really, if I'm honest, the move was all about maybe perhaps meeting a nice hostess or two rather than any positive career move, I think. But I got into the operations side of aviation very early on in my career, and did lots of things. I did flight planning, I did crewing, I checked in passengers. The only thing I never did was actually fly them as a commercial pilot. So I spent most of my career now as an operations guy, and I think probably the pinnacle of my career was I was one of the team that started a small airline which you might know called EasyJet. So I was head of operations for EasyJet with Stelios and the team, and spent 5 years there when we set the company up. Before then moving on, and I actually moved to Ireland. I came over to Ireland to work for Arienta, as it was then, and I came over as a general manager at Dublin Airport. So did a few years there before then heading off to the Middle East, where I worked in Abu Dhabi for a few years, and then most recently Singapore, before returning to Ireland, where we set up Kestrel Drone to fly drones commercially and offer commercial drone services to anybody who was interested in Ireland. Yeah.
So obviously then you've a wealth of experience there that you've spoken about. So how do you think that COVID-19 has impacted the aviation industry and maybe the drone industry also?
So I think COVID-19 has obviously really affected the aviation business, and I think unfortunately in the last year or so, the aviation industry has almost suffered what you might almost term as a perfect storm. The aviation business was already suffering because of the environmental pressure. You know, we were seeing more of this naming and shaming of people who were using, you know, air travel to get around. So the aviation business was already in a battle, and then suddenly COVID-19 comes along, and it's almost a perfect storm. It's really, really suffered. And I think, I mean, the business will rebound. I mean, aviation, if you look back through the history of aviation, wherever we've encountered a major crisis, the business has bounced back. It may take a bit longer this time because people are still scared. People are still scared of a threat that they can't see. They even today, walking in the street, going into the supermarket, people are still frightened. They don't know if they've come close to somebody who's carrying the virus, and people will be reluctant for a while to get back into enclosed spaces, you know, where they could be sat very close to somebody who may or may not be carrying the virus. But I'm sure that the business will bounce back. It always has. It's a very resilient industry. It will come back. It might take a bit longer this time. Yeah.
So How has Kestrel Drone Ltd managed during COVID-19?
So the drone business in general, it's been quite interesting because things, flying has been curtailed because of things like the travel restrictions. So unless you had a client, if you were a professional drone operator, unless you had a client that had, that was able to designate you as an essential service, then you really had to adhere to the travel restrictions. So that put quite a lot of pressure on drone operators. They couldn't travel outside of their, whatever it was, the 5K limit or whatever it happened to be at the time. But having said that, a lot of the operators were still, the professional operators were still able to operate. They had clients who did need their services, and they were able to get out and about. On the other hand, there has been a lot going on, I suppose, behind the scenes, non-flying activities. Here at Kestrel Drone, we've been doing a lot of office-based work. So we've been helping clients to produce their operations manuals, for example, or bring them up to date. We've been doing quite a bit of consultancy on the new EU regulations, which were due out actually now this year, but those have now been delayed because of the COVID-19 crisis. There's still been a lot going on. There are things that you can get on with, which don't actually involve getting out and physically flying drones.
So obviously you mentioned earlier about how you think that the industry will take a lot of time to recover to its kind of pre-COVID levels, and it will involve a lot of consumer buy-in in terms of being in a confined space. So how do you foresee the drone or aviation industry recovering or changing as a result of the COVID-19 crisis?
So I think the aviation business really has to step up to the plate and accept, the fact that any transport system that allows the rapid transit or the rapid travel of people or goods, they have to accept the fact that nowadays that gives the opportunity for a virus like COVID-19 to spread quite rapidly. It's more than having HEPA filters on board the aircraft. It's more than recycling the air on board the aircraft every couple of minutes. We have to look at the before and after. So before passengers get anywhere near the airport, before they get to check-in, the processes that they have to go through from check-in to the aircraft side, those will probably have to change. We may have to get used to a new normal, which would be, whether it's temperature checks or some form of physical check before we get anywhere near, the aircraft door. The environment on board modern aircrafts is actually very comfortable. It's very clean. It's safe. The modern aircraft, and particularly, the very new aircraft like the Boeing 787 or the Airbus A350. Fantastic environment on board those aircraft. The simple fact is that if somebody gets on board with a transmittable virus, a HEPA filter is not going to miraculously cure them before they get to the other end of the trip. The industry has to accept the fact that, there probably needs to be changes in terms of whether it's, the track and trace system, whether it's pre-flight checks. And I think the industry's definitely learnt a lot from this crisis. And even now, you go into Dublin Airport, you go into any airport around the world, it's a very different experience because of the virus. Will it become the new normal? I think some of it, yeah. Some of it has to, because this is probably not going to be the first or the last time this happens. There's a possibility of other viral threats around the world, I'm sure. So what we need to learn from this experience is, how we've dealt with it, how we help to stem the spread. If that means that people have to be checked, that maybe people need to share more details about their travelling, all of those things which would help to bring back a bit more comfort and a bit more trust, in the system.
Yeah.
And people need to feel comfortable. If any public transport system where you're in close proximity with other people, the bus services around Dublin now, it's a very changed experience. I don't suppose any of us would have thought that a few months ago we'd see a bus pass us by with everybody on board wearing face masks. But that's the reality at the moment. And it could be the reality on board aircraft in the aviation industry in general for quite a few months to come yet. In the drone community, it's been quite surprising actually, because a lot of companies have actually suddenly realized how useful drones can be. We've had lots of inquiries from companies who've realized that by using drones, they can remove their staff, they can remove their personnel from risk situations. They can have them in a standoff position where they would be less exposed to the risk. So lots of companies now who are looking towards drones to be able to do things that they probably never thought they might do, with a drone. So, where we've had a situation where the flying has become less because of restrictions, travel restrictions. Lots of companies who initially were obviously focused on very internal priorities in terms of how do we protect our staff, how do we continue to work, what's our business continuity plan now that we have to deal with this virus. So lots of companies who were quite inwardly looking for a while, once they got into, once they were able to manage that situation, they began to realize that maybe there was something, one of those processes that we had, maybe we can use a drone to do that now. So we've had inquiries. The professional drone community in Ireland has actually seen a rise in inquiries from companies who've realised that by employing drone technology, they can still get out and about.
So lastly, would you have any advice to students currently studying or hoping to study and move into the aviation industry, an industry which has been severely damaged?
Advice to students at the moment, the thing to remember is that in the middle of every crisis or difficulty, there's opportunity. The aviation industry really needs innovators, and there's a great opportunity for innovators at the moment. So we've had a major crisis in terms of the COVID-19. We've had crisis before in the aviation industry, and a lot of the answers that we've come up with have come from innovators who've looked at the situation and thought, well, okay, we can do something about this. So I think in terms of advice to students at the moment, I know people, you know, they'd probably go, oh, goodness me, think outside of the box, yeah? You know, the great thing about the aviation business is it continuously evolves. You know, if you look back to the Wright brothers never ever thought that in their wildest dreams, they would never have thought we'd be doing what we're doing now with aircraft. But we've only been able to get there because of innovation and evolution. Look at the industry. Have a look at the challenges that face the aviation industry today and think about solutions. So even, you know, for a crisis like the COVID-19 crisis, have a look at that. How could you deal with that? What solution could you come up with in terms of, and look at all the processes from the check-in process through to the baggage handling, the boarding, what happens on board the aircraft, passenger security. Now, you know, there's an interesting challenge at the moment. How do you get passengers through the traditional security screening process now? If, for example, the security staff can't approach somebody and physically pat them down, yeah? So what's the solution to that? There's lots of opportunity. And I think the other thing to remember is aviation is not just all about the shiny aluminium tubes that we fly along at 40,000 feet in. It's not all about, you know, it's not all about the pilots that are sitting up front or the fantastic cabin crew that are working down the back. There are so many other things go on in the aviation business, so many different disciplines, whether it's, you know, operations, passenger handling, air traffic control, airport management, engineering. There's so many opportunities. It's a vast business and a global business as well. And the one thing I think that's always been very clear in the business is that Ireland has produced some incredible companies in the aviation world. You know, Ireland is actually regarded around the world as one of the leaders in the aviation business. You know, if you look back through the history of aviation in Ireland, we wouldn't have duty free if it hadn't been for Avianta. You know, some of the biggest leasing companies in the world here in Ireland, you know, some of the biggest finance companies that are involved in aircraft leasing based here. Lots of opportunity, and even more so now, I think, as the industry recovers from the COVID-19 crisis, there will be more opportunities, not less, there will be more, because the industry needs to get back on its feet, and it needs people to come in with ideas as to how they can achieve that and achieve it quickly in whatever field that might be. I think that's without doubt the industry will bounce back, but it will need
significant changes to be made, I suppose.
Yeah, the industry will bounce back. There have to be significant changes.
Thank you, Raymond, for taking your time out to share your insights on both the aviation and drone industries.